And so, good morning, good morning, California. Good day in on the Eastern Coast. Good afternoon in Europe, and very good night for the people from New Zealand and Australia. So we are getting to the most important part, and on this session we have a prestigious panelist that will talk about the importance of seaweed in the environment. And before we get into the discussion and before we introduce the panel, allow me to introduce the Minister from the Sea and the Government of Portugal, Ricardo Serrão Santos. I know him for quite a long time. He has been an activist when he was at the European Parliament. He's one of the most important promoter of the blue economy. He's on all fronts, and he's very involved in the sustainable development of the seaweed industry. And Portugal is very close to my heart. I've seen the evolution of the country for the past years into the blue economy, and really what they've been doing year after years is really stunning. So I will give you the floor, Ricardo. Take your time. Would like to understand what you intend to do, and what is your vision for the development of the seaweed industry in terms of environmental impact. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre, and thank you for the words, mainly concerning your nice words towards Portugal. And yes, I was also to salute Alexis Botsman and Mrs. Marion Verles, Alexandra Cousteau, and Iain Shepperd from the European Commission that I don't see since a long time, and all the esteemed participants. Yes, I'm very pleased, Pierre, to participate once again in a BioMarine event. I note, if you don't mind, that my first public intervention as a Minister of the Sea was precisely at the last Marine Bio-Business Convention, which you remember for sure, which was held in Cascais here in Portugal in November 2009. And this time, okay, we have this event virtually, but around the clock and across the world. That's a great thing. I would also like to congratulate that this is a gender balanced session, gender equality in the sea sector. I think someone has the micro on. Could you verify this, please? And I continue. Gender equality in the sea sector is still under construction. Although I want to stress this, women are a vital part in the sea-related activities. And the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, besides of the well-known SDG 14, also addressed gender equality in the SDG 5. And together with the SDG 14 and SDG 13 that is related on climate action, our goals deeply interlinked, as the ocean, as we all know, is a major climate regulator, is a major carbon dioxide sink, and highly impacted by climate change. And policies are being designed to recover economy and social welfare, profoundly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We are now beginning our plan of resilience and recuperation. And while steering for environment and climate goals through the decarbonization of the economy, the application of circular economy principles, which focus on process efficiency and research sustainability. And the blue economy plays a fundamental role in this. Recently, I was organizing and hosting as an event under the Portuguese presidency of the European Union, the workshop and the meeting related of integrated maritime policy in Europe, but one was dedicated to the blue agenda in the Green Deal. And algae are a vital, seaweeds are a vital part of the new blue economy we wish to develop. And I'm pleased that in this session we concentrate on seaweed cultivation, seaweed agriculture, and the role of seaweed on this process of carbon sequestration, the service that the seaweeds in fact due to the environment and to the climate. We know that any human activity has impacts on the environment, and many require scientific research to be understood and better implemented or exploited. And the same goes for seaweed cultivation. We know that seaweed are part of the blue carbon ecosystems, that they can help reduce the risks and impacts of climate change with multiple co-benefits. And this was referred in the IPCC special report on the ocean and the cryosphere in a changing climate in 2019. The surprise is that only in 2019 we had a report of IPCC dedicated to the ocean, but it is a great report. And below ground carbon storage in vegetated marine habitats is much higher. We now understand this than most territorial ecosystems. But besides carbon capture, seaweeds can provide other positive impacts. The first and foremost relevant one is that they are an incredible source of food if feed. Rich and essential nutrients, seaweeds aquaculture can boost our capacity to better feed and more better feed and more sustainability of the world. For animals, it has been shown to be a potential relevant feed ingredient for aquaculture, replacing animal-derived feed, for example, and even complement fish shells too. Also, if used as a dietary supplement for ruminants, it has been shown in ongoing studies, it is not completely, to suppress methane production. And in the island of the Azores, from where I come, the sport Asparagopsis is an algae that is harvested manually and under strict levels control for minimum impact, and is exported from this process of testing the role of these Asparagopsis on the reduction of production of methane in ruminants. Additionally, seaweed's biomass can be used for biofuel or biogas production, providing an alternative for fossil fuels or new based materials and components. And they have been used for centuries as fertilizers in agriculture. And more recently, scientific data has been supporting different algae components for different crops, yielding better results. Seaweed can also be used in biotechnology, in applications in so diverse as pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, alternative materials, including to alternatives to plastics and others. For example, seaweed compounds are used in approved drugs against respiratory virus proposals, and some seaweed components are currently under testing against SARS-CoV-2 virus 2. Several seaweeds are today used as premium support and health nutraceutical supplements. There are many examples. And in fact, the use of seaweeds is exactly a potential and the reality as ecosystem service providers. By replanting and restoring sea forests, we can help the ocean recovery, and that has shown that these ocean forests are indeed great productive locations that increase the biodiversity nearby while providing negative CO2 emission source of energy and biomass. In Portugal, to come to my country, we have identified 700 species of seaweeds, of which 60 were approved for consumption and 70 with potential of commercial exploitation that is already determined. While 34 tons produced annually represents only 0.25 of the aquaculture in Portugal, the facts are that production grew 70%, while the global growth in aquaculture was only 11%. And the exports grew from 74% to 99%. I refer to the years of to the years of 97 to 98. That's where I have the data. That's mean, in fact, that there is an investment on the production of seaweeds in aquaculture, and that it is this investment is growing faster than the aquaculture in general, including the issue of for exports and what they represent in terms of exports. All these, the possible uses of algae or seaweeds have been advocated by the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy. This is a group of leaders of 14 countries, 100% committed to sustainable ocean management, including the Prime Minister of Portugal, and where I was appointed as a Sherpa. I've been following the work of this group. In December 2020, we launched the Ocean Panel, the high-level ocean level panel of concerning the sustainable blue economy. We launched a transformative set of recommendations and actions to advance a sustainable ocean economy, prioritizing a healthy ocean alongside sustainable production to benefit people everywhere. And regarding sustainable new ocean industries, we indicated as a need of action the scaling up of environmentally responsibly commercial farming of seaweed and algae. In December 2019, the European Union has taken a major step to face the climate environmental crisis and respond to the Agenda 2030. This is the European Green Deal. One of its bricks of this European Green Deal is the farm to fork strategy. And this strategy aims to reduce the environmental impact on the food processing and retail sectors by acting on transport, storage, packing, and food waste, and to identify new innovative food and feed products such as seafood based on algae. Just last month, the Commission released its communication on sustainable blue economy, where blue economy pivotal role is recognized as a central piece in the Green Deal and recovery and resilience plans. Along with this movement, the European Union is also preparing a communication to be launched in the second quarter of 2022 regarding the algae sector, presently under public consultation until August 2021, and I invite you to participate. And Portugal's brand new national strategy for this decade, just published officially 2 weeks ago, also address algae aquaculture and its potential as a powerful emergent sector with several applications. Combining traditional sectors like fisheries and aquaculture with the algae potentials is an avenue we are pursuing and supporting in Portugal, and the data that I just referred shows this. This strategy is the third ocean strategy Portugal has. Along the years, these strategies were proven to be guiding documents to boost ocean affairs nationally and internationally. We hope to promote the value of marine ecosystem service and the recognition of their roles as vectors of sustainable development to enhance the contribution of the sea to the economy of this country, my country, the prosperity of the well-being of all Portuguese, and to respond to the major challenge of this decade. I trust that seaweed will play an important role in this endeavor, and initiatives like BioMarine are important to discuss ways of future action, and I congratulate once again the organizers for this. Thank you very much, and thank you, Pierre.
Thank you so much, Ricardo, and I know that you'll be busy, so we feel free to leave whenever you want.
Thank you very
for
much.
a nice introduction, and we, of course, will follow carefully the development of the seaweed industry in Portugal, and by all means, we're going to help you. Thank you so much, Ricardo. So let's start with the panel. We would like, to introduce each of you, and the best way to do it will be, to give you the floor. So, ladies first, and Alexandra, is there a way to introduce you in a different way? So, can you tell us who you are, what you've done, and why it's so important to have you on this specific panel?
Well, I think for me, I would just say that I've been in the ocean community. My family introduced me to the oceans when I was a baby and took me on expedition, and I could swim before I could walk. So I've been brainwashed from birth to care and about oceans and love oceans. And I think what's exciting for me about seaweed and the reason that when we started Oceans 2050 with the goal of driving the restoration of abundance in our oceans by 2050, we started with seaweed because it is such an extraordinary catalyst for the restoration of ocean abundance. It really has the potential to be a great driver for that. And I think it's important in this context to talk a little bit about how we articulate our ambitions and why seaweed is so important for that. And my father and my grandfather were really the first back in the 1960s to start articulating a conservation ethic for the oceans, and talking about the importance of preserving and protecting and sustaining them. But that was back when there was still 90% of our oceans. Today, we've lost half of our oceans. And so talking about preserving and sustaining what we have left feels really insufficient. Seaweed gives us an opportunity to think about the blue economy in terms of restoration and abundance. It can really be the cornerstone of a regenerative blue economy. And so that's what brings me here to this conversation, because I think that what's so important is that we do it right, that we don't make the same mistakes in the ocean that we've made on land, that we don't talk about the blue economy in terms of sustainable exploitation, but rather in terms of regeneration and rebuilding. And seaweed has a major role to play in that.
For this nice introduction. Iain, you're one of the most important components at DG Mare working on seaweed, and you work behind the scene. So maybe you can introduce yourself for the people. Everybody will know your name, but maybe you can be more explicit on what you do on a day-to-day basis. You're on mute. Click on the mic at the left icon near the...
Okay. No, okay. Sorry. Yeah, it was on full screen, so I couldn't do it. But yes, I've been working in DG Mare on ocean topics for the past 15 years. And I agree with the Pope, really, that it's not necessary that marine biodiversity has a value to humans. It has a value on its own. However, we don't have a right to destroy what has been created. We don't have a right to make species extinct. However, having looked at algae from different aspects, I'm finding that it does have a big value for humans as well as for the environment. And we've been trying to put numbers to this through impact assessments, and I can tell you more about that later. But I'm looking at numbers, see how much China produces compared to Europe, looking at the potential for nutrient absorption, looking at the potential for feeding humans, and I firmly believe that algae has a great potential in Europe, and the algae strategy that will come out next year should help to guide us on that way. I mean, I can go into more detail later, I think.
Of course. And Olavur, you're the only industry representative on the panel, but we choose you because you're doing, seaweed cultivation with a very sustainable approach in the Northern Atlantic. So can you make a quick introduction about who you are and what you've done so far?
Yes, my name is Oliver Gregersen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ocean Rainforest. We are based, as you say, in the Faroe Islands in the North Atlantic, but we do also have a subsidiary in Santa Barbara in California, and where I am actually right now. And yesterday we were out and could conclude that our first deployment of seeded lines outside Santa Barbara have been successful, and we have the first growth of macrocystis on the line. So that was very good. But my background otherwise is that I come from an island community where the ocean is a very concrete part of our living. Our existence is based on the ocean. Of course, fisheries for centuries. In the last 30, 40 years, also aquaculture in terms of salmon farming. But 10 years ago, I was made aware of that, of course, there was a lot of focus on climate change and what could be done on that. And a young man made me aware of that, in the Faroe Islands, we have actually one of the largest ocean territories per capita in the world. And we could do something with climate change, not by growing forests, because we have very little land area, but we could grow forests in the ocean in order to take up CO2. As you know, seaweed takes up carbon when it grows. That was actually the sparkle that sparkled my interest in this. And when I then realized that, okay, this can be used for both food, feed, and potentially replacing fuel-based products, I really could see a business potential in this. And I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm in this for building an industry, as you say. I always find it a bit strange when we talk about a seaweed industry in Europe and in the US, because we are very small, and the industrial application of it are indeed at the pioneering stage. But I definitely see a potential for it. And I think this panel discussion, I think it will be good to discuss also some of the approaches Alexandra mentioned, because if we want to do seaweed cultivation at large scale, we really have to discuss aspects of environmental impact and how we assess and approach the ocean with that respect. As Alexandra already mentioned, you have these two words, sustainable utilization or regeneration and conservation. And to me, those words are very much semantics. It's you can't do anything in the ocean unless it's sustainable. But there is, and that's what we are facing a bit here in California. You have to accept, do you want to use the ocean for anything? Or anything where we go out and cultivate and harvest and use it in a land-based context, or do you not want to use that? Do you only want to have an approach where you grow something in the ocean? This is a very fundamental discussion, and politically extremely important that the political system makes clear, what do we want? Because there's no point in talking about an industry that is based on producing products on land if we don't want to allow companies and entrepreneurs to go out in the ocean and set up a business model that enables such a blue bioeconomy.
Thank you, Olavur, and I think that
I say goodbye to you. I wish you a very good debate. Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Olavur and Iain.
I will send you the recording.
Thank you very much.
The recordings. Thank you, Ricardo. Bye-bye. I think we all agree about, the sustainable use of the ocean, and it's part of our future. But the real question is, how are we going to convince the general public and the consumer that what we're going to produce in the future is essential for them? And we are all on a crusade. So we're talking about sustainable use, we're talking about regeneration. And the key question is, how are we going to make, the switch in the general public to convince the majority of the consumers that seaweed is good for them, and that will, I would say, foster, accelerate, multiply, the initiatives and the will to regenerate and to grow sustainable seaweed for more, I would say, final product, to the consumer. Alexandra, what do you think, and what should be done to that extent?
Well, one of the things that we've noticed is that there isn't a lot of understanding in the public space about seaweed and what its potential is and its impact on the ocean. And in fact, just today I was being asked, well, if you have seaweed farms, given the red algae blooms and these other blooms that we're seeing in the ocean, aren't you afraid that it might create the same problem? So there's a real lack of understanding about macroalgae and what the opportunity is, what the potential is, what the benefits are, how it can both help us rebuild our oceans and contribute to the just transition. And that's tremendously important, communicating that to people so that when seaweed farmers are going to their permitting hearings to get a permit and permission to go start their seaweed farms, that the people who are giving that permit understand what they're asking for, that communities who have somebody in their community who wants to start a seaweed farm actually understand that it's not necessarily the same thing that's happened on land that's destroyed our pollinators and destroyed our land, that it can be something really regenerative. So I think there's that need to communicate to the public and to decision makers and other stakeholder groups so that we're all on the same page about how to do this and how not to do it. And my big concern is that, everybody's talking about seaweed, everybody wants to do seaweed, and there's going to be operators that do it in a way that's damaging to the ocean rather than doing it in a way that is regenerative to the ocean. And I think that would be my fear. Oliver is a great example of how to do it right. And our team has really enjoyed the conversations that we've had with him and learning from him about, what this potential is. And there's a lot of room also, which is exciting, innovation and research and development and technology. We need to invest in that space. We need to develop it so that this becomes a solution that can rebuild ocean ecosystems, in the Arctic, in Europe, in Asia, and also contribute, as I said before, to women and communities and the just transition. And I think that's one of the focuses that we have, is to help tell that story and communicate that opportunity as one of our work streams to help scale regenerative ocean farming.
So true. And during some of the session before, we were discussing the utility of sinking, some of the seaweed to capture the carbon in deep ocean. But the people, mentioned that it's a terrible mistake. There's so much value in the seaweed. It could be used, up in the value chain. And we can develop a sustainable aquaculture that will take that into account. And I think that we are just at the beginning of extending this organic seaweed cultivation. So Iain, the next question is for you. So at the European Commission level, you've been preparing the ground for years in terms of policy, in terms of how we're going to educate the public, the general public, the industry. So do you think that we do enough? And what action should be taken in the next future in parallel of the agenda that you're going to announce to make sure that more and more people engage with us on the different initiatives?
Well, I mean, seaweed, I agree entirely. You shouldn't sink seaweed in the deep ocean. It is a valuable food. The production in Europe, I can speak for Europe, is infinitesimal. It's about 10,000 times less than in China, for instance. But there's big discussions now on what we call the Fit for 55 package. That means how we're going to get 55% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030 and zero carbon by 2050. And one of the things that hasn't come out in this conversation is the problems on land. Do you know that, okay, but there's going to be renewable energy, 60% of it is biofuel. If there's going to be more carbon sequestration, it will be in peat bogs, forests, land. So there's less area for feeding people, feeding animals. There's going to be a massive shortage of land. If you can shift production of protein from land to sea, then you can make a big contribution to not only saving emissions, but saving land. There's and then there is one opportunity that you may not know, may not be aware of, but offshore renewable energy is set to grow by a factor of 5 by 2030. By 2050, there expects to be a quarter of the area of Belgian Sea, Netherlands, and Poland. And this offers a space for aquaculture of algae. If you filled up this area with algae, you could produce as much protein as you presently get from chickens or sheep. So this is an opportunity, I feel, to really contribute to food production, to emissions reduction, and if the Chinese are prepared to eat it, then surely we could persuade the Europeans to eat it.
I totally agree, and I think that when you look at seaweed, it's a unique organism that can give you lots of interesting biomolecules and products, and at each level of the processing, the product becomes the byproduct becomes a product. So there are many ways, to envisage the full utilization of seaweed, not only for protein, but also now the next hype is the hydrogen, which doesn't bother me because we're not talking about biofuel, we are talking about fermentation. And in that case, we're gonna manage, to use all the byproduct from the seaweed. So why not? But what we need to take into consideration is really the importance of the seaweed industry in terms of ecosystem services. And maybe Olavur, you can comment on this because you grow in the Northern Atlantic part, you grow this kelp and this, I would say, kelp forest. So did you notice, the regain in terms of biodiversity, in terms of added value, in terms of product that you can grow within your forest or within your kelp? How does it work, and how can we estimate, this value?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we know from science that we do bioremediation in the area where we are cultivating seaweed. We have a whole concept called integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, which is all about that, how you can remediate nitrogen and phosphorus from land-based agriculture, but also from ocean-based aquaculture, like salmon farming or shrimp farming, where you feed, and you know that 50% of the nitrogen in feed is released into the ocean, and as such, you are always supplying the ecosystem, the marine ecosystem, with nitrogen. Seaweed cultivation can take up that nitrogen, and in addition to it, it takes carbon. So there are some very concrete ecosystem services that seaweed cultivation can do in relation to other protein production we have in a region. In addition to that, we know that seaweed forests, kelp forests are around for a purpose. They have for millions of years served as nursery for ocean habitats in different growth stages. In our seaweed farms, we can see a lot of small fish because they like to be around kelp forests as to hide for larger predators and also to feed. Because when we have our lines, we create our lines in the water for 3 years, and we can see that and you can see that already after a year that you have small microorganisms growing on the lines, and they are a feeding ground for other larger microorganisms in the ocean. So you can really see how you create an ecosystem, and that is, and you can see it with fish, you can see it with birds, and you can do benthic research in the area and confirm this. And that has partly been done in Sweden, partly in Norway. Ocean 2050 is in the project, pretty worldwide, looking at the same. So the ecosystem services are without doubt there. The problem is there's no valorization of it. There's no valuation of it. And so as a seaweed farmer, or as a seaweed producer, I don't get paid for doing that. In fact, I feel like I'm being punished by trying to clean up from those who are polluting. And this is very fundamental from a political point of view. If there's no cost of polluting, you pollute. And then there could be, people like me and others trying to save the world and become a bit naive in this whole complex because, we are doing this without getting paid by any means by doing what we are trying to do in terms of cleaning up. So one fundamental political instrument here is, as Iain already said, really to get these assessments that have been made of valorization of ecosystem services, get them into the economic paradigm of when you are producing food. If you pollute, there has to be a cost related to it. And that cost has to be allocated to those who try to clean up. That's one aspect of it. And seaweed, as we already said, it works very well. We can see it even here in California yesterday when we took up the lines. I could see a lot of fish swimming around the lines. So we are really, and of course that's just my observation, but again, this is a value that we often tend to underestimate because we focus so much on the product we can get out of the seaweed, which obviously is very important. But an important aspect from an environmentalist aspect point of view is the services we provide in the marine ecosystem.
Maybe one of the key drivers for accelerating the seaweed industry will be the offsetting of CO2. And to that extent, I'd like to know, and Alexandra, you have the answer to this question. I know that you've been hard working on this resolution of the equation so far, but where are we in the equation? Can we valorize the CO2 that is captured by seaweed? And if it's not done yet, when can we expect something from you? Because I know that you spend your energy on this.
Thank you, Pierre. And Oliver, I couldn't agree more with what you just said. I think that the current paradigm where people are compensated for exploitation and the damages that arise from that is a fundamentally flawed design in our society. And what we need to do is to figure out how we compensate people and companies and initiatives for being stewards of the environment. And so seaweed farmers, from our perspective, should be compensated for carbon sequestration, for biodiversity, for environmental remediation, for all sorts of things, because those are very real services that are provided to the environment, to the ocean, and therefore to all of us. One of the ways that we're helping advance that idea at Oceans 2050 is by developing a voluntary carbon protocol around the carbon sequestration that occurs under seaweed farms. So as kelp grows, our chief scientist, Professor Carlos Duarte, believes that up to half of the plant falls off and falls to the bottom and gets buried in the sediment, and that carbon then is permanently sequestered. And so we are currently working with the first global group of seaweed farmers from 23 countries on 5 continents that represent over 20,000 seaweed farmers, which is really exciting. 60% of them are women, which is also really exciting. But we're doing that science now, and we're hoping to be able to announce the results in October at COP. And based on that, we will write a peer-reviewed scientific paper to be published. And based on that, we will develop a voluntary carbon protocol, help to monetize this service and help to scale seaweed farming in a regenerative way. We're looking at how we develop carbon optimized seaweed farms. Part of our study is also of the sediment to better understand how seaweed farms aggregate biodiversity and how that impacts the environment. And we're also starting a social impact study so we can understand the value of seaweed farms to the communities next to them. Yeah, all of that to say, Oliver's right. We have to figure out a different way of doing this, a different system, and that the paradigm in the future should be that we are compensated for stewarding our environment, not exploiting it.
Agree, and we expect, that you can foster, the achievement of this formula and the publication, because this is so important for accelerating, the development of our seaweed industry. Yes, Olavur, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, no, I think I think what Alexandra is doing, our Ocean 2050, is definitely one important step in achieving this. But you asked about who should we convince in order to get an understanding of these things. And I just would like a very small comment on that, which is related to this, because this is really about a general public acceptance of that we need to do some changes. And there, I think we really have to focus on what I call millennials and Generation Z, because these people, they want changes. They know that something has to happen. And they are looking at seaweed as one thing that definitely where they see that there are possibilities to do something. And I would say even especially the female part of them, because they are really concerned about what's going on. If you look at ocean rainforest, I think we have like 70% of our 14, 15 staff currently are female, between 25 and 35, and most of them academics. Why? Because they see this as one important mitigation method for the future. And older people like myself, we tend to see, okay, yeah, we like to talk and write reports about this, but these younger people, they want to see action. And I think one of the key drivers to really get into this in these talks and in this motion is to take that seriously, that these young, intelligent, well-educated, top-motivated people, they can really make a change for this industry in the future, or make this an industry, and make this a sustainable industry. And of course, regulators, they are there, and they need to be convinced with science and with the good narratives we also have, and with the fact that the future generations, they want to see changes, along with what Alexandra verbalized.
But I think that Alexandra has been an inspiration, because since this morning, everybody, would like, to embrace, the seaweed industry and to engage and develop, seaweed farms. So I think this is very good, and this is the best way to accelerate, the shift. I have a question for you, Iain. How the governments and the international organization could accelerate, this transition? Do you have mechanism that we can implement to force, maybe not to force, but to convince in a very direct way the industry to be more supportive of the seaweed industry by sequestration carbon? Is there a way at the European level to accelerate this transition?
Well, first of all, Oliver's question about nutrient absorption. We are doing a study now that should start in the next few months or so. Things are always a bit slow, to try and work out on a European scale what this could do for eutrophication, just to get some orders of magnitude, and then we could start trying. What you're suggesting is to charge farmers for what they produce, and to compensate those who actually remediate. I mean, it's a long process, but we're beginning the process now. As far as sequestration goes, then Alexandra's doing the right thing, gathering the scientific evidence. But to get it to have a monetary value, you've got to include it in the UNFCCC reporting. At present, there is no, they have a spreadsheet with all the things that you can include, like manure applications in farms, you have fertilizer application, but there is no sheet to report emissions or sequestration from aquaculture. The only thing is inland aquaculture ponds where they have where the soil's giving off methane. But this would be a step, and we are looking at this. We are intending to put into our research projects some of the first steps, as Alexandra's doing, maybe not only for seaweed, also for seagrass, and then to try and engage with UNFCCC and IPCC to see how we can get it, because once you can report it, then you can include it in your emissions targets or your emissions reporting, and so you can reduce your you can reduce the amount that you have to reduce other emissions. Of course, people are a bit frightened about it because, you know, you wouldn't want people to fraudulently claim sequestration and then increase their emissions. So I think it's a 10-year project. So
I hope we can go faster, you know, Iain. This morning during the session where we were talking about blue investment and seaweed, our friend, you know, from DC Thompson was a bit skeptical on the carbon sequestration. Say, well, I need, you know, to get some numbers. And say, well, we are all working, you know, towards this, and this is very important. But I think that will be the leverage, because if the investment community gets a way to offset the carbon, then we're going to start, you know, to develop blue bonds, you know, to accelerate the farming, to compensate more. And I think that we're going to achieve much faster the objective in terms of CO2 reduction, but also in terms of coastal protection, ecosystem services, nutrient reduction, and aquaculture, you know, for getting the right protein and bioplastic. So I think that we all rely on Alexandra's job. And and there's no pressure, Alexandra, but it's so important what you and Carlos are doing that we really want, you know, to see that happening very fast. So
Pierre, well, and I just wanted to mention to Iain that we will be pursuing, once we've developed the voluntary carbon protocol, we will be going after the UN next. So we don't expect that it'll take 10 years to get there. We think maybe 5 at most. But stay tuned. We will be sharing all of this every step of the way.
Yeah, and we're going to ask, you know, Vincent Duméziel to accelerate this. You're doing the Global Compact, and we had our friend from the FAO, Assam, you know, that is also very supportive for this type of acceleration. So we have less than 10 minutes. I would like maybe what will be the unique message that we need, you know, to pass to the next generation. I'm talking about next women generation, because we know it's mostly women that are working in seaweed. And I will keep you for the end, you know, Alexandra. I will start with Olavur. You work with a lot of women, you know, at your company. So what will be the USP and the unique message you want to pass to the next women generation?
Well, to me, they have already got the message. So I don't have to pass so much. What we are trying to do is to find understanding among regulatory authorities that this is something that is worth doing, and And that's really where I see the greatest barrier today. The industry is very keen to test these products. We are already sell most of what we produce. We are selling into the the functional feed market, and this is another part of the carbon aspect as well, because it seems that you can reduce feed consumption when you add seaweed as a functional ingredient in the feed. When you reduce feed consumption, you reduce carbon, because a lot of feed products are transported around the globe. So that's another aspect to take into this. Plus, research we are doing in both in Denmark and here in the States on using brown seaweeds to reduce methane emission in ruminant animals has also an impact on this. So, and you know, the younger generation, they all get that. I don't have to, I get 1 or 2 applications for traineeship or interns a week from around Europe and US. So there's no need for come up with fancy messages about this needed. What I'm struggling with are those who are responsible for what activities shall be in the ocean. They have a hard time grasping how shall we deal with this new thing. And I understand it, it's new, and you don't want to do anything to destroy anything that's not there. But this is really where I call for innovation in the regulatory regime, and we along with changing the paradigm as we have talked about. It will take years. I completely agree. But changing a procedure, saying, okay, here we have a farm. Let's see if we can look at the licensing process. So it doesn't take 2 or 3 years and costs $1 million or 200,000 to 500,000 euros to come there. But can we expedite that? So we're talking a year of process and a cost that is doable for those who want to get into this, because that's really the turn off today when it comes to seaweed cultivation. It takes too long time to get in the ocean, and it's too costly in permitting processes.
Thank you. I think that on the methane part, next generation is more inclined, to eat the seaweed than eating the coast that will heat, the methane and that will emit, less methane. So this is a challenge, but I think that they have understood that seaweed is the best protein for their diet. Iain, what about the message that you pass to your kids? Do they listen to you, and do you think that in the next future they will be seaweed enthusiasts?
Yeah, well, the only time that my kids found anything interesting in my work was when I was working on marine plastic, and I was doing the impact assessment, and I could actually explain what we were doing, and I even gave a lecture at my daughter's university, and seaweed presents more challenges, but as you were saying, I think the younger people have already got the message about healthy food, and women, as we know, are more educated than men. I know in UK universities, 35% more women than men are studying for a higher education. So I think maybe we also need to think about the older generation, who are the ones that are voting for these reactionary governments that we're seeing around the world.
Nice comment. So Alexandra, you have the final word. Everybody listening to you, you have a name, you represent something for the next generation. What is the takeaway message, and what should we do?
Muted.
You're on mute.
One of the worst things we can do is think that we've already lost, and a lot of people, is there any hope? It feels like the oceans are dying and there's nothing we can do. And the truth is that we haven't reached that point yet. And we still have, a good decade ahead of us before we reach tipping points from which it'll be difficult to return. And so the most important thing that any of us can do is to really focus on the solutions, focus on the things that can help rebuild our oceans, and focus on personal accountability. I think seaweed as a for all of that, both symbolically and practically, is not just intriguing, but it's inspiring. I never thought that I would be focused as much as I am on seaweed. And yet the more I learn about seaweed, the more excited I become, because it is something that has the potential to change a paradigm. We talk about, I'll never forget, I was in Portugal for the Blue meeting that was held with ministers of the sea and fisheries ministers from around the world. And it was meant to be held ahead of the UN Ocean Conference, which was subsequently postponed due to COVID. But I was one of the only non-ministers present. And all of them were talking about the blue economy in terms of sustainable exploitation. What does that even mean? Sustainable for me in terms of the ocean is a word that doesn't take us anywhere. You can sustain a coma patient for 10 years. It doesn't mean that they're going to come home for Christmas. And we really need to come back to us. So articulating our ambitions for the blue economy in terms of sustainable exploitation, I think is going to lead to a whole host of problems. You can't measure sustainability. There's no yardstick for success. It's easily co-opted. It has been co-opted. And when it's used like maximum sustainable yield for fisheries, it's part of the problem. So for me, the blue economy, if we articulate it in terms of regenerative, then we have yardsticks to measure our progress, and we have a clear outcome that we want to achieve. And we are focused on growing the net positive of the oceans, rather than focusing on avoiding net losses. I don't know. I think that how we talk about the ocean and what we envision for the future, and what we believe is possible, is tremendously important, because that allows us to take different set of actions and to support a different host of solutions. So that would be my final word. It's still possible, and together to get there, but we need to articulate our ambitions differently.
And you can count on us. Thank you so much. Just for our friends that are recording, there's no need to record, because we're going to post the session on the BioMarine website. I know that each time Alexandra is on the session, everybody wants to record you, but this time again, we're going to post it on the BioMarine website. No need for that. Thank you so much for this inspiring discussion, and we look forward, to make some great achievements in between, because next year we hope to come back with more projects, more realization, and I'm pretty sure that Alexandra, by the time we reach the next seaweed around the clock, we'll have a solution to provide for the farmers, and we're going to get the right equation. Thank you so much, and I invite you to click on the next if you want to talk about industry development using seaweed possible edible compounds. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.